The following program is sponsored by Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County and the generous gifts of these contributors.
Welcome to our 44th season of Mosaic. I'm your host, Susan Shulman Pertnoy. Mosaic is Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County's weekly news magazine, exploring the most critical issues facing Jews here and around the world. I've had the pleasure of interviewing today's guest several times, and it's always an engaging and informative experience. Today, we welcome the CEO and Director General of the Jewish Agency for Israel, Amira Ahronoviz. She's leading the way on some incredibly complex issues, emerging from a global pandemic, a flood of immigration to Israel, and of course, the war in Ukraine. We'll also explore how those issues connect us here in the Palm Beaches to our global Jewish community. All that and more coming up. We're so proud to celebrate our community visionaries, donors who contribute $1 million or more, serving as an inspiration for all of Jewish Palm Beach. Welcome back, and joining us today is the CEO and Director General of the world's largest Jewish organization, the Jewish Agency for Israel, Amira Ahronoviz. Welcome back to Mosaic, Amira.
Thank you, Susan. I feel at home.
I love
what
when you're
privilege.
on the show. I want to start with Ukraine, the war in Ukraine. What role is the agency playing now? The war has been on for almost a year, and I'm sure it's different. Can you talk about that?
So I'll say from day one, as the war broke, it was very clear to us that our role is first and foremost to be there to help save the lives of tens of thousands who ran out for their lives from Ukraine and actually also from Russia and the region. I'll say that we were looking into different scenarios of what this would look like, and we assumed that we would have some rough period of having a few thousand run out. I think none of us have imagined the scale, the scope, and the pace by which this would happen. And so fast forward 10 months from now, 10 months since, we are completing a year with a groundbreaking record of number of Olim, new immigrants to Israel, whereby over 55,000 individuals have come out of the former Soviet Union from Russia, Ukraine, and the region. So if the first couple of months were really characterized by being fully invested in rescue operations, very complex ones, we have situated in 4 countries surrounding Ukraine, in 5 crossing borders, and mobilized hundreds of staff and volunteers to take care and provide the services to those refugees. I'll say now we have shifted, the heavy gear has shifted really to help them integrate into Israel and embark on new life here. Having 55,000 of them come to Israel in such a short period, their journey doesn't end when they land in Ben Gurion.
No,
it's true that it's the saving of their lives which mattered the most, but then once they land in Ben Gurion, this is when the journey really starts. And when you think about those people who came in a very unplanned way, almost with nothing, no resources, not necessarily having any plan for themselves for a job or for housing or for where to live. So this now becomes a very, very heavy lift of ours along with the government and other partners. But at the same time, we're still out there surrounding Ukraine. We're still situated in Poland, in Hungary, accommodating a few hundreds that are still coming out every month. and providing the ability to make aliyah to all of those who are coming out of Russia. So we're actually in both places right now, on the field and in Israel.
Amira, I was fortunate to be able to join a small group from Jewish Federations of North America almost a month after the war started. We went to the Poland-Ukraine border, and we actually saw you in action, or the Jewish Agency in action, and organizing everything for aliyah and immigration for these people who were just suffering, and really with literally holding garbage bags. That was what they came out with. So it was a difficult process. You were working with your partner organizations to try and figure out how to get them to Israel. But fast forward, I hear now that you actually have an app for these people. Could you talk about that?
We believe that just as you manage everything in your life today through the mobile and the app, and you track, right? You track the package that is about to be delivered, you make decisions about shopping or anything important in life through the mobile. And we want to make it easier on those people who are choosing to make aliyah. And so we are currently in the beta status of an app that we already launched and are piloting in some parts of the world, not yet around Ukraine. We don't want to risk the rescue operations, but definitely in other areas of the world today. Someone who makes aliyah could start to track their process on the mobile and then get the notifications and the updates and the requirements and make sure that the process is more smoothly advancing. As well as a piece of that app would involve being able to match people with mentors.
You mentioned earlier that other Eastern European refugees are making aliyah to Israel, including Russia. Can you talk a little bit about what the tone is in Russia right now?
Yeah, so I'll say that we are concluding the year of 2022, as I said before, with over 70,000 olim from all around the world, which is a groundbreaking record number since the 90s, which is, by the way, twice as much as the highest peak we've had prior to COVID. And so this is really an enormous scale, out of which 55,000 came from the former Soviet Union region, whereby 15,000 came from Ukraine and a little over 40,000 came from Russia. So already early on, as the war broke and this crisis had broader implications on the whole region, we've started to see huge demand and interest from among the Russians, no less than the Ukrainians, to come to Israel. It is true that the Russian Jewish community is 3 times fold bigger than the one in Ukraine, so one could claim that, that is the ratio that represents that. But nevertheless, we know that, the people coming out of Russia have been choosing to move their life to Israel, not seeing any future for themselves in the country, probably also as an outcome of the current situation.
On that note, we have to take a break. We'll be right back after this brief message. When new immigrants arrive in Israel, how are they supported? The Jewish Agency for Israel is using lessons from the past to improve the future. We'll have more on that coming up on this episode of Mosaic. You want to give back or lend a helping hand, but don't know where or how? There are lots of volunteer opportunities in the Palm Beaches. Visit jewishvolunteer.org and get involved. We're back, joined by Amira Ahronoviz, talking about the war in Ukraine and its impact on global Jewish community. Tell us about what the Jewish Agency's role is now in helping Ukrainians that want to stay in Ukraine have a Jewish life.
So I should say that prior to the war and in the last 30 years, we've been very present in our community work on the ground in all of the former Soviet Union countries, Russia and Ukraine as well. In various areas, we're providing a whole chain of informal education, providing summer camps and seasonal camping for thousands of youth and kids from all across Ukraine, as well as operating Hebrew Ulpan classes, Sunday schools in dozens of locations, as well as work with the formal Jewish day schools and work with the local communities. In addition to that, we work to mobilize young Jews from Ukraine, come and experience Israel, whether it's through birthright, whether for longer experiences in Masa. So all of that was on its place until the breaking of the war. Our ability to continue to do some of those operations was halted and limited because of the physical threat of life. Life in Ukraine, to some extent, are trying to, come back to some normalcy. There is huge damage to infrastructure, and the ability really to maintain activities and daily operations in the way that it was before the war does not exist today. Nevertheless, we are doing kind of two things in trying to help them maintain their Jewish life. One is that we've moved some of our activities to be virtual. So we're currently operating, for example, Sunday schools for groups of kids and their parents from Kiev, from Odessa, from Kharkov, virtually. It does not compete with the in-person, but at least it gives them some sense of not being alone, some sense of being a part of a community and a family, and being able to share with one another experiences and thoughts and dreams about the future. We have moved most of our Ulpan Hebrew classes to be done virtually as well, so it enables us actually to widen the geographical scope. Ukraine is a huge country for people from all around the country to join those classes. And I'll say that in some cases what we're trying to do is to take the kids outside of Ukraine and provide them the services and then bring them back. So just now we have had in the last week over 100 kids, teens from Ukraine that we took via ground transportation outside to Latvia to have a summer camp, winter camp, a seasonal camp. Some kind of a respite, some kind of experience, some normalcy for a few days with their peers, their age, and then they're going to come back. And so I think what we're trying to do is a combination of what is it that we can go back to do on the ground within the communities, which is very limited currently. What is it that we can take them temporarily to some safer, common space and atmosphere, but give them this sense of normalcy, at least for a period of time. And then what is it that we're able to move to do virtually? And we're doing all of that, in a way that hopefully gives them a bit of a better optimism about their future.
That's remarkable. Now, give us some insight into what the process of absorption is into Israeli society for those who want to immigrate.
So I'll say the following. First of all, the fact that those new immigrants, which come in a refugee state, many of them traumatized from the horrific journey, come in a very unplanned way. The ones who came from Ukraine a lot of them are single mothers with their children because they've been separating from their fathers, the male who could not leave Ukraine and still cannot leave Ukraine. And when we think about 10 months already that those, separated families are in Israel and their, beloved ones are still there. So it's very, very difficult in many aspects. At the same time, I think two areas serve as a source of of strength. The first is they come into a society where 20% of its population actually come from that region. So people who speak their language, people who know their culture, people who have gone themselves through a journey of migration, and have gained the skills and the kind of steps you need to take. And so if we catch them at the initial period and provide them with this, I'd say, bridging linkage of a few months, they're then set much, much better off to embark on their new life. And so I think those two are serving as the major areas of our investment currently.
Not to mention the Ethiopians are coming in with Operation Zor Israel at the same time. How are you dealing with that?
So I should say that as a global organization that has to address the needs of Jews at any given moment, wherever they may be, we don't have the privilege of closing one shop in order to open a new one. So, we won't leave any Russian or Ukrainian behind because we need to bring an Ethiopian Jew. We won't leave any Ethiopian Jew behind because we have to bring a Ukrainian and Russian one. So, the premise is such that we have to do whatever we need in order to cater and serve and be there for any Jew at any given moment, even if it's on multiple arenas. Having said that, I do agree that it sent us to stretch the boundaries of our organizations to imaginary limits this year. And so we found ourselves actually in this period expanding and opening new absorption centers. And I should say, very encouraged by this current wave of Aliyah from Ethiopia. We're seeing a population which comes much more educated, with more exposure to urban environment and technology, and so the opportunity to help them early on as they start to integrate is I think is more promising in the sense of their ability to then build successful life in Israel.
On that note, we have to take our final break. We'll be right back with Amira after this brief message. Our community's connection with Israel runs deep. We'll talk about why those bonds are more important now than ever before. Next on Mosaic. We're so proud to celebrate our community visionaries, donors who contribute $1 million or more, serving as an inspiration for all of Jewish Palm Beach. One of the best ways to combat anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred is through education. Learn more about the complex issues that lead to hate at jewishpb.org/standuptohate. We're back talking with Amira Ahronoviz, the CEO of the Jewish Agency for Israel. I'm going to shift gears for a second and talk about an amazing training program that you have, and it was developed in consultation with Deloitte Group.
So early on, as we understood the kind of scale and scope of number of new Olim we're going to get to Israel, it was very clear to us that one thing we have to do is to go back and try to learn from the mistakes being done when the big wave of Aliyah in the 90s from former Soviet Union came. And I don't know if you're familiar, there is a civic society movement in Israel called the 1 Million Lobby, which is really led by younger generation from amongst the kids who were born to those families who came from Russia in the 90s. They see themselves as kind of this in-between generation. Many of them either were born in Israel relatively soon after their parents made Aliyah or came at very early age. And they were actually approaching us as well to say, you know, let's together learn from the mistakes to not then repeat them from the 90s. And together with them and the Ministry of Aliyah and Absorption, we commenced a big research. We used Deloitte, the global firm of Deloitte, to commence this research, which was one of its kind and very holistic one. And they came back with very interesting findings, where the three main ones were that if there is one factor that is critical for the success of the absorption, it's the acquisition of the language. So people are so disoriented in so many aspects if they don't have the language. And on the contrary, when they do have the language, everything becomes more possible and achievable. The second is that the training, the job training, as a way to help people relatively soon find a job that is not that different from what they came with the experience with.
Right.
Because in the 90s, we had so many cases where people came with so high level of professions, such as engineers of forest or of coal mines or of doctors of physics, but then found themselves, at least for the beginning period of a couple of years, you know, wiping floors in hospitals or in shops because they weren't able to acclimate themselves in a way that they would understand the culture of the job market in Israel in their profession. And so what this research has taught us is that if we invest in the initial period of helping them do that, both help them to attain the language, many times even the professional language. So how do you help someone understand the professional terminology of medical profession in Hebrew or of engineering profession in Hebrew, and then help them to understand better the culture and the way by which the job market works, and help them, you know, match them with job opportunities. Deloitte was really instrumental in helping us to crystallize these understandings and then translate them into how to design interventions in a relevant way.
It's really terrific. We're going to change topics for a second. We're going to talk about the Sahar region, and which is Federation's partnership region. That includes Rosh Pina, Hatzor, and Tzfat. Federation has had a partnership with them for almost 30 years. Why do you think it's so critical that communities such as ours have a partnership relationship with communities in Israel?
I'm smiling because at the earlier stage of my career, I've been endless years in this organization. At the beginning of my career, one of the roles I've had is being a partnership manager. And so I know from firsthand what kind of a transformational experience that could be for people who get involved in those partnerships. And I think the magic in it is the fact that, we, on the bigger vision, we want to try to connect. We want to make sure that 20, 30, 40 years from now, we will stay connected, the different parts of the Jewish people. And so for that to happen, we know that people need to know about one another and then care about one another and develop relationship to then be carried on for the longer term. And so for that to happen, we have to create the opportunities. We live so far apart. We live life that is to some extent very different in its nature, both its Jewish nature and its daily nature, but to some extent we share so many values and tradition and history and culture. And so the Partnership Together network, this network of geographical partnerships, I think enables to create something very personal, very particular, very intimate in the opportunity for nurturing those relationships. And I'm hearing you saying it's been already 30 years that Palm Beach has this relationship with Tzahar, and all I'm thinking of is think about the teenager who was at the first beginning years of your partnerships 30 years ago was 13 and was part of some kind of a youth exchange or a program or a mission. Now 30 years from now they're probably parents to kids. If we did a good enough job in igniting the spark and inspiring them for that to be relevant, for this connection to be a meaningful one, this is a way then to carry it between generations. And so the partnership has refreshed and renewed itself all along the years. But what stayed at the core of it, that it's about the people-to-people relationship.
Speaking of people-to-people relationships, you also have a remarkable program at the Jewish Agency, which is the Shlichim program. And we are proud to say that we have a wonderful Shlicha. Her name is Hani Kolan. And we also are participating in now the Shinshanim program that you have. And I don't want to get these girls' names right. It's Tom Benesty and Agam Ilovich, who are with us this year. And I personally had an opportunity to meet with them. They were actually interviewed on the show. They are remarkable young ladies. They are so clear and sophisticated for their teenage years. They've just graduated from high school, and they're here for a year before they start their service. Why is it important that the Jewish Agency have these programs?
So I'm so happy for this question to be coming after the previous questions about the partnerships, because for many years we kind of thought that the relationship is about us Israelis just having to educate Jews from the diaspora enough about Israel. And so the notion of sending shlichim, stems from that. So how can you bring Israel in a very relevant and informal way to the environment of the community? And the shlichim are doing an outstanding job in that sense, whether in schools, synagogues, campuses, etc. But what we've learned over the years is that those shlichim themselves, they are transformed themselves no less than what they're doing in the community. And it's an eye-opening experience for them to experience Jewish life outside of Israel, to get to know, the so diverse and rich way of Jewish life that you can experience in a community like Palm Beach. And so what we love about the Shlichim program and the Shinshanim specifically, because they're so young and that they're at this age that they come with such huge energy and enthusiasm, yes. And they're so open and welcome to kind of dance the tango from both ways. And then they take back this transformational experience of theirs back home to Israel. And then they're young enough still to make sure that this, becomes a relevant part of their life back in Israel. And so we're very, very proud to be able to continue to grow the global network of Shlichim, where we send over 2,200 a year all across the globe, from shorter periods to summer camps to longer periods, such as the Shinshinim for a year, and then for longer periods in other settings. But what we're learning is that what happens to them during the shlichut stays with them for life, just in the same way that the people that they're meeting and developing relationship with in the community, they stay with it for life. And I'll say the most pure example is what we see happening for host families of Shinshinim. So this young Shinshinim, they live with host families, usually between 2 to 3 families in a term of a shlichut. And what we're seeing, which we're so happy and excited about, is the kind of relationship that develops between the hosting family and the family of the Shinshin or Shinshinit in Israel. So they immediately become, an
Connected.
extended family.
Right.
And so when the Shinshin goes back and drafts to the army, the American family continues to follow them and be part of that. And then when they travel to Israel, then the Shinshim family becomes their host family. And what we see along the years is how those relationships continue to evolve, even when they get married and they have children. And it's all about this sense of all being part of one family.
Yes,
right?
Which brings me to my last question. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Why is it so important to have relationships between the diaspora Jews and Israel, especially at this time?
When we think about our historic narrative, our 3,000 years of, being a people that once were united in the Eretz Israel and then were spread all across the globe, and thinking, what is it that kept us all along the years, aside from the tradition and the culture and the values, it was the care for one another. It was this notion of, as much as we are far apart, there's so much that connects us. And when we think about, any future today for the Jewish people, I think it requires just the same. Israel, in order to thrive and to have a strong future of its own, we need thriving, strong Jewish, vibrant communities abroad. And at the same time, we believe that Jewish communities abroad to thrive and to sustain, need to be inspired by this home of the Jewish people, by the state of Israel. Now, this is not going to just happen automatically. And so for us to continue to feel that we have a reason to care for one another, that we have some shared future and some shared,
aspirations,
and I would say destiny, and not just, a past, is something that we have to proactively work towards. And then creating all of those opportunities for constant connections and relationships is something that is required to make sure that we stay connected also with our children and grandchildren and grand-grandchildren tens of years from now.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you join us. Thank you for all that you do, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you for the Palm Beach Community and Federation, which is really an outstanding partner of ours in so many aspects, from the emergency and making sure that we're able to save lives, up to sharing with us the need to make sure that we stay connected and caring for one another in the future. So, huge privilege and honor to be here.
You're amazing. Thank you.
This program is sponsored by Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County.